Okay, so I should probably just start from the beginning. I'm not sure where to start, but I was born heavy, so I always used to joke that like I was born fat. And I'm pretty sure that's where it all started was just bad genetics with food. My mother became diabetic while pregnant with me from making bad food choices. My father became diabetic when I was young from probably something similar, but he was the healthiest of us all. Most of my family was diabetic and just had weird relationships with food. I don't know if I would call them food addicts like myself, but it was definitely not what normal eating behavior should be. I remember just having heavy portions as a kid, needing to be in the empty plate club. It almost became like a competition, I think, in a way, because my cousin would be over every day and we eat, and like I was always done first, and like I don't know, had to prove a point. It was weird. Like I don't really remember it, but being on this food journey and doing my steps and like thinking about it now, like why did I have to shove it down my throat and in my mouth at such a young age? It wasn't necessary. I wasn't starving. We always had food. Like it was just weird. I definitely noticed though at like I want to say maybe 10 that I definitely was showing addict behaviors of some kind. I was stealing some cigarettes from my dad and like hiding that. I was hiding food in my room in my underwear drawer, which then turned into just the snack drawer. No clothes would fit in it anymore after a time. It just got that bad with cookies, candies, you name it. Even healthy foods like fruit would be in there. Like as long as it was edible, it went in the drawer. Then I want to say I was 12, and it definitely became like a real addiction, like just the hiding, the lying, the taking, like all of it. It just started happening for real. And it got to a point where I had to be like over 200 pounds. I was definitely like the fat girl in my class. And I used food to kind of cope with that and just eat to eat because like food ended up becoming my best friend. I used it for everything, whether I was happy, sad, like whatever. It was just intense. And I didn't really think about how bad and unhealthy my choices were till I want to say I was 13, and I started cutting myself over these choices. And it was so dumb the first time I self harmed instead of choosing the food. Like I should have just stuck with the food. Like, yeah, I was fat, but at least I wasn't doing crazier shit. I used to cut myself because all my friends had boyfriends, and I come home and just it was so dumb. I wasn't even like cutting myself like a true emo kid. I literally just take a shaver and just press. Nothing would happen. No real blood, no nothing. Just like, I don't know. I thought I was like fixing the food problem by doing something else that was probably more dangerous in the long run, even though I wasn't bleeding. It was definitely mentally damaging. And then let's see, I want to say around 15 was when my mother started getting really sick. And both, I don't know, I think of self harming as another addiction that I had to overcome. So I was living like two diseases of addiction at the same time between the food and the cutting. And once my mom got diagnosed with kidney failure, it was game over. It fucked me up. Like she'd be driving me to school and could barely breathe because she was drowning in her own fluid waiting for dialysis. And that shit just fucked me up. Like I would on the way home, like walk to the local pizzeria, shove down some food, walk the rest of the way home, and then have another meal. I would have like four huge meals between 2 p.m. and bedtime worth of food, just trying to conquer dealing with her being sick because we were told that the average dialysis patient only lives about 10 to 15 years after starting treatment. Their bodies just start shutting down. So I was going to be either 25 or 26 losing her if the odds were in our favor. And I was not mentally prepared for any of that. Like, my mom, even today, is still my best friend. So it's extremely hard to think about her even being gone. The thought of losing her then was insane. Like, anyone will tell you, my mother was everybody's best friend and took care of everybody. So we were not ready for that rock to go away. So just dealing with that was a challenge. Then at 19, I got diagnosed with diabetes. And that's when things really went to shit mentally for me. That's when self harming definitely got to be at its worst. And that's when the food really starts hitting my story for real, like extra hard. Just snacking all day, munching, grazing, thinking that metformin was just going to take all my problems away. As long as I take my meds, I can do what I want, when I want, eat whatever I want. And I'm coming to learn now, 11 years later, that is not how it works. It took me a long time to figure out that, like, I have to make better choices. But this is still a time in my life where I didn't think that I was an addict. I just ate to eat. Like, you eat to live. There's nothing wrong with me. I eat to live. It's cool. And then this is also around the same time that I never know how I didn't figure this out. I'm still baffled at myself that my father was an alcoholic my whole life, probably because I was hiding my own shit and just didn't know it. My dad went to AA when I was 19, and he started teaching me about like the 12 steps and stuff and trying to explain it to my mother because we didn't get it. We thought it was just easy. You just stop drinking. And again, it took me another 11 years to figure out that, like, no, you can't just stop. There's so much more to it than stopping. So the next, like, probably 7, 8 years, my dad stayed sober. Things were going good. I wasn't in the food as hardcore, but I was definitely still in the food. But I was making like public choices, I guess is how I'll word it. Like, going out to the buffet with my friends and eating 10 plates instead of like three, like they would do. Or, ooh, how many of these little cheesecakes can I shove down my throat? 14's my record. I'm a little proud of that number. I'm not gonna lie. But, just making choices like that that definitely affected my health. My diabetes affected me mentally. You know what I mean? I would do that shit and then I'd go home and cry because I would walk into, my mom on the dialysis machine, my dad clearly, depressed because he couldn't have his alcohol anymore. My dad still struggles with drinking to this day, especially after losing my mom. So, like, just walking into that, like, yeah, my life was really great, but sometimes, like, you can see the bigger pictures where things aren't as great and it screws you up. It's really hard. And then I don't know, things are always at like a good point. Like, I ended up having my first boyfriend at like 19, and I don't know, that was like the first time where I kind of stopped doing bad things to myself between the food and the self-harming. I was kind of at like a plateau, but I definitely wasn't any kind of recovered. I just didn't do it because I was like, "Ooh, yay, boyfriend, someone loves me." Coming to find out, like 10 years later, now that we're not together anymore, that the only reason that he was with me was because it was easier to get the fat chick than actually try to find someone compatible, which that fucked me up finding that out too. Like, it's just stuff like that that was super triggering. And that's where the binges would really fall into place for me. I wouldn't say I became like a crazy overeater, but when those situations hit, food was always the answer. And I was starting to like kind of realize that in my late 20s that I was definitely making bad food choices and just eating 20 cookies, just doing crazy shit that like no one should do. Doesn't matter, how healthy you are. You shouldn't consume what I was consuming as my norm. It was definitely bad. Then we go a couple years up, and this is where shit gets kind of heavy for me. I ended up losing my mom at 26, which mentally I prepared for 10 years ago. No, I didn't. I thought I was ready. I knew she was sick. That ended up being the worst day of my fucking life. I think about it now and I might cry, so no one look at me. Um, I was sleeping in my house, minding my own business, and it's crazy. I was all alone. My dad was at work, my sister was at home. I was waking up, getting ready to actually binge because I knew I was alone. I actually was ready to like just eat the whole house up. And my sister storms in the door and tells me that we have a decision to make about mom, which I was not ready for. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, she's at the hospital. She's losing her foot. We already figured this out. Like, what fucking decision? Like, I'm hungry. I'm making breakfast. And my sister's like, no, we gotta go. And that's when I found out that my mom had gangrene in her toe. So they were going to remove the whole foot. And the infection from the gangrene ended up going into her bloodstream and stopping her heart, which caused her to go into the ICU and her blood pressures to drop to the point that she would need to be on a machine 24 hours a day in order to live. And my mom was not doing that. She was like, I'm done. I don't know what y'all are doing tonight. I'm eating with Tom Petty. We're having steak. Figure it out. And I remember just saying my goodbyes and begging her not to go. And I told her, I'm like, I'm not going to be able to do this. Dad's going to drink again. I'm going to die. You cannot go. And I think back on that now, and I was the most selfish person I could have ever been at that moment, begging for her for myself. I wasn't even really thinking about dad's drinking. I just didn't want to tell her that, like, I was desperate for help and I needed her. She passed away and my life spiraled. I give it maybe 6 months, my dad started drinking again. I didn't find out till a year later because I just kind of hid from the world for a while. That's when my food addiction definitely sparked. I don't know if I would call it a rock bottom, but it might as well be. I was working at Wendy's at the time, so I had access to thousands of nuggets and thousands of burgers and millions of individual french fries, and I shoved a bunch of it down my throat. I was probably eating over $100 worth of Wendy's food every day for free and not even thinking, just doing it. And it was like getting high. I felt this euphoric feeling. The food gave me so much comfort. I never felt alone. I would go there on nights off and like pretend to help my friend Dave do paperwork for the store just so I could eat. And no one would see me because they didn't care. I was the fat kid. Like, oh, the fat girl's eating again. Oh. They didn't notice that it was actually me trying to like score in a way, as fucked up as that is. And then my cousin Danny, 5 months to the day in the exact same hospital room, ended up passing away from an overdose. And I wasn't at the hospital when I got the official call. I was at Wendy's and did the same thing. I didn't even tell anybody, just started crying while making sandwiches. I literally be wrapping customers' orders and taking a bite of my own food, just munching. I couldn't even like talk or cope. And I was aware, I mean, I was visiting him all weekend. So I knew that just waiting for it, I thought I was mentally prepared, but heck no, not even close. And just binging, doing that same thing, just getting high off the food to cope with my feelings was definitely one of the worst decisions I could have made. I was in therapy too and didn't even realize that like food was an issue. I just kind of told him that I was sad. I was sad all the time, but it was really just food. I was just addicted and still going down the rabbit hole not knowing. And then I met my boyfriend. I want to say I was 28, and he started noticing my behaviors. I ended up moving in with him 5 months after we got together. He got an apartment to move out of the recovery home he lived in. I slept here the first night and I never left. And he started telling me that he thought I was using. Where was all my money going? What was I doing? I didn't have access to free Wendy's anymore, so I had to pay for it. Son of a bitch. It was just so bad. I was going through drive-throughs multiple times a day to get that high, maybe spending 40 bucks a day. My bank account was always in the negative for food because I had to have that access to hide it. I couldn't bring it in, couldn't bring it out. So that's what I did to score my high on the food. And he thought I was using heroin. He was like, I think something's really wrong. Like, what are you doing? You have no money. You're depressed all the time. You're sleeping. Like, what are you doing? And he looked at my bank statement and he was like, this isn't good. Like, I think you should do something. And I didn't do anything. I was like, I'm just hungry. I'm the fat kid. You knew what you were dating. Haha. We ended up getting pregnant in January 2022. The baby ended up having no heartbeat at like 6 weeks, 2 days, or something weird like that. Went to get the procedure for the miscarriage, and that's where shit hit the fan. If I couldn't be a mom, if I couldn't do what my mom did for me, I didn't want to live. So I turned to the food even harder, just even freaking harder, to the point that I had no money in my bank account. All I did was pay my half of the rent. Nothing else was getting done. It was crazy. It got to a point that I made myself sick. And when they told me the official diagnosis that my unmanageable diabetes what caused the baby to have no pulse after a while, that's when I finally took OA into consideration and was like, oh, the 12 steps worked for my dad for 11 years. It can't hurt me. So May 22nd, 2022 was the date that I started going to OA. I rarely miss meetings. It is the best decision I ever made. But I was still very stubborn. I was still very into the food. It took me now, I think it's been like 3 weeks, and I finally got a sponsor. And it's just crazy how this works between you guys and Dopey and everything else. I truly do believe that higher powers exist. Like, there was a reason Liz told me to come here, and there's a reason that you're all in my life. And it's just crazy how it all works. Like, I try to believe my mom's my higher power, but that's probably wrong. But I do believe she makes fun and cracks jokes and decides stupid shit. And she definitely is playing jokes on me because the day that I asked my sponsor to be my sponsor, I told her I've been very sick all week and I think it's the food. I think I'm finally hitting another bottom and I need help, and I need help now. Come to find out, I am yet again pregnant. I'm 7 weeks. We're not really making huge announcements yet because I'm fucking petrified of another miscarriage. I am so scared because I'm on insulin now and I know I'm healthier and I know I'm better, but I'm still freaking out. But like, thanks to you guys and a higher power and OA and just all this shit, like, this is gonna work. I don't know if this is gonna work that I'll have a baby, but my life in general is starting to work. And we're just kind of living it one day at a time. And I'm sure as I work the steps, I'm going to find more stuff in my story or figure out where I went wrong or some kind of more food shit. Who the hell knows? But with you guys by my side, I think shit's going to be better. And there's my share. Ta da! I lived.